Many of you here already know me, but for those of you who don't, my name's Lauren. I work at UVic as a researcher, and I'm also on the board of directors here for SimRes. So I thought, again, because many of you know me, many of you don't know, though, how I know Jackie. And this woman has a lot to answer for in many ways. So opportunistically, in 2008, I was visiting here and I was up North Island and I bumped into Jackie. And I was at a very kind of influential time in my life when I was trying to make big life decisions about university. And where I come from, there's more sheep and horses than there are people. And I was being strongly encouraged to become a vet because that was a really good, solid job. And, you know, there's a career path there. However, my heart has always belonged with the whales across here. And as you know, I saw whales when I was very young and wanted to become a marine biologist. So I was kind of going through this whole, what do I do? Steps Jackie and basically says, you know, if you want it, you can make it happen. And showed me an example of how her life was involved and how dedicated she was to working with the whales. And I thought, you know what, if Jackie can do it, she's right, I can do it, kind of. Hopefully. So since then, I've been trying my best to emulate Jackie's path. And so Jackie's been, unknown to her at the time, was a huge impacting factor in my life. The second strong female that really impacted me was this whale. So this whale is J28. And during the summer of 2016, we had to watch his J28 deteriorated in body condition after giving birth to her calf. This whale was particularly of a spunky character in nature, I will say, and she had always been kind of very dear to my heart. And to watch her suffer and deteriorate over the summer and finally lose her battle, and it resulted in also losing her calf, really made me take stock of what I was doing, because it no longer seemed enough to be a researcher. Producing papers and reports is one thing, but recognising we have to do more, and I had a responsibility to have my voice be a little bit louder for this whale and all the others that we're losing. And so that's really the path that then set me down to why I'm here today. Getting involved with SimRes and realising that you, the public, have such an important role to play in the future of these whales. I think me and Jackie are going to try and tag team as best we can today.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Okay, dear folks, you can imagine what that means to me, hearing from Lauren that actions and words can have such a direct impact. Look, though, at the carbon I burnt today to get here. Yeah? You should be critical, because I have to be good enough that it is worth that. Also, you should be warned, I call myself the marine detective. So what the heck? Who is this woman? What expertise may I have to share with you? I am a teacher through and through. For me, the whales are always barometers for human value systems, ambassadors for environmental health, because ultimately for me, I'm concerned about the health of all future generations, especially children. So that is how I began my work. I was working in the Netherlands for a long time, and in the eyes of society was perceived to have a good career. I was deputy head of the International School of Rotterdam. But then I went on one whale watching trip out of northern Vancouver Island. And I suspect almost everybody here has a story like this, where nature suddenly slaps you upside the head and you realize you've drifted off course. I jumped. I left my job. I did not have a job to come back to in British Columbia. And it was the family of the A12, specifically with Nimkish, A33, that had this awakening for me. I started working on the very same whale watching boat, so my expertise lies with the northern residents, and trying to make those experiences desperately count to counteract the noise and fossil fuels that we were putting into the environment, and maybe to help people get their heads out of their asses about our capacity for change, and that this is not just about killer whales. A huge part of what I do, though, is take pictures of animals underwater, not marine mammals, because I would never bother them. Because if we continue to think only of whales in isolation at the surface, you're a sophisticated audience. Please take this critique. If you see whales in isolation, you are perpetuating a very big problem. And that is that people do not understand why the whales are here. I know this as a humpback researcher, that people ask the question, why are the whales here? It is entirely the wrong question. The question is, why would they ever leave? But our bias is towards Mexico and Hawaii because you can see down to the fishes. If you can see down to the fishes, you do not have the planktonic soup that can sustain giants. So I actually think the more valuable work that I do is take pictures like this. This is at only 3 meters depth at a boat ramp in Port Hardy. It is a species of sea slug. You knowing its name is unimportant. The point is, most people do not know it exists. And I hope that by putting these images into the world, there might be the right humility in understanding how little we know and the problems of our disconnect with the ocean, and understanding that the whales and other marine mammals are showing us what we are doing potentially to our own futures. But then this happened while I was on the boats, and I'm very much an in the trenches educator, trying to make those experiences count. The humpbacks started coming back. And folks, you can't ignore them. What an incredible story of second chances. But it was unacceptable to me to simply look and go, oh, look, it's a whale. I wanted to know who it was. What were they telling us about change? What a powerful story to try to engage people to understand who they are, how they're using our coast. And oh man, am I in deep. We are the Marine Education and Research Society. That sounds like we're a big organization. We're not. But we are the provincial leads on education to try to reduce risk to the whales and frankly also to humans. So I very much want to talk in this perspective of remembering how we can change, because I think in this whole campaign for the whales is to remember how quickly we can change when fear is replaced by knowledge. Let's go back really far, but first, again, to emphasize why am I, as a humpback researcher, now talking about orca. Well, they brought you here, didn't they? They're an incredibly powerful ambassador. They have been studied as individuals longer than any other whale species on the planet. 90% of the northern residents have been known since their birth. They are therefore indicators of ocean health, because we know if they're male, female, what they eat, where they go, how old they are. So by doing things like looking at contaminant loads, you can see what's happening, male versus female, where they go, what they eat, and so forth. And they also are so powerful in reminding us of how we can change. So now we're going way back. 146 years ago. How did we develop these ideas? How have we changed? If we understand how we change, can we perpetuate that forward? Why, yes, we can. Back in the day, 146 years ago, you could be both a whaler and a naturalist. Talk about multitasking. In our ideas about the killer whale, it started off with descriptions like this. They are marine beasts. They spread terror and death, devouring in their marauding expeditions. They always seem intent on something to destroy or devour. Sounds a little bit different than the way you talk about orca, doesn't it? This is where we've come from. What changed? Again, as snapshots of who we used to be. Now we're moving into a time that people in this room were alive in 1956. Unthinkable now, but Walt Disney wanted a dead orca. Where it went to, what they did with it, the whole story runs dry. But the man that is quoted here is still alive up in my area. He was a whaler. And he remembers that this whale had to be killed in a pretty cruel way because it had to be intact without any big blast holes or anything in it. It was Walt Disney that wanted a preserved killer whale. Unthinkable now. Unthinkable now that our government put a machine gun at the middle of Vancouver Island for the purposes of executing killer whales. Now understood that they would have been northern residents, but the perception, this is a brilliant snapshot of who we were at this time. We bombed the places that sea lions had their babies. The nose of a seal was worth $5 for a job well done, paid by the government. We chopped basking sharks in half. I could go on and on and on. But the perception, of course, about orca was there were thousands of them, and they deserved to die because they were bloodthirsty pests and they all ate our salmon. That machine gun was never fired at the whales out of a combination of fortuitously they moved on, but also somebody decided, maybe not a good idea to have ricocheting bullets off the surface of the water for human safety. But this was, hear me, this was our government giving in to the powerful lobbying group of recreational fishermen. There weren't enough fish, couldn't possibly have anything to do with us. It must be those damn blackfish. Who we used to be, this is now the year of my birth. This is in my lifetime. From a book in that time, yeah, they are the fiercest, most terrifying animal in all the world. They're capable of attacking anything that swims. They are afraid of nothing. They're intent on a career of destruction and mayhem. Yeah, they are filled with a burning hatred. Hey, folks, I'm a scientist. How do you measure burning hatred? Yeah, what unit would you use? This is entirely vilification of orca. Yeah, nothing that lives or moves in the water is safe from assault. This black monster is feared wherever it is known. 1960. How many people in the room were alive in 1963? Yep, there we go. If that isn't testament to how quickly we can change. But of course, 1964, you Saturna Islanders know all too well, that's when Moby Doll was then captured, was supposed to be a sculpture for now the world-renowned Vancouver Aquarium. That happened off East Point. Nobody would ever tolerate that now. But also another snapshot of the time, 1964, the US Air Force would use killer whales for strafing runs, shooting from the air. So clearly, with you being here, clearly none of that would be tolerated. We have an incredible capacity for change. Essential within that is that we began to see whales as individuals. Please don't misunderstand me. Above all things, what we have learned from having orca in captivity is they do not belong there. But I don't know that we would be where we are now if the vilification hadn't been dissolved because of finding out who they were and in thinking of them as individuals. So every orca has its story, of course, and especially those that ended up in captivity. I find the story of Namu a very powerful one. So after Moby Doll was captured, there was an offer of $25,000 US in 1964 for that captive orca that died after 87 days. But of course it started the gold rush. There was an overlap in our shooting at them, and now this pest is worth something. There were no controls over how many you killed in the process of going after them, the animal husbandry conditions, those sorts of things. Namu's story is that, true story, 2 drunken fishermen accidentally caught 2 orca in their net off Namu on the central coast. The female escaped, believed to be the mother. These were C5 northern residents. And Ted Griffin from SeaWorld was such a brilliant businessman, he built a net pen and transported Namu down the coast, stopping at the various stations so that people could develop a connection to this whale. The whale's story behind this is that the mother of the male followed all the way down to the middle of Vancouver Island to Campbell River, calling with C5 calls all the way, and then learned from Dr. John Ford, is apparently then she made every call from the northern resident repertoire, turned around and left. We began to understand who these whales were. We began to understand they were sentient. We didn't vilify them. And having them in captivity played a role within that. Already by 1970, it led to there being much reduced social license to capture whales for captivity. So your neighbors, the southern resident killer whales, understandably were the ones who were pursued the most often for captivity. They've always been easier to access by urbanization. They would go after those whales again and again and again. They are smart, they would try to evade these attacks. So by 1970, it had ramped up to the point of using boats to rush them into a bay and to drop seal bombs down on them. But they knew, so they wouldn't, the whales that they trapped, they would only plumb out what they wanted. And in this particular time, 4 animals died. They knew enough that people would be really upset about this now, so they slit open the stomachs, they filled them with rocks, but some of those killer whales washed ashore. And there was huge public outcry. So, oh boy, can we change. To lighten the mood just a little bit, let's look at movie covers. 1977, this of course reminds you of what? Jaws, yeah? Yeah, we like those scary, the big predators, yeah? We also had horrible ideas about sharks. But if you've watched this movie, what it is essentially is everything that cover suggests. Yeah, there's a male and a female, and they're baby. Because, of course, that's how they organize themselves, and probably they thought that the male was the leader. Ha! Like that happens. Anyway, yeah? So male and female with the baby. Yeah, and the baby gets killed, and the female gets killed, and the male goes on revenge and bites off Bo Derek's leg. That is what that is, that plot line. If I'm trying to show capacity for change over time through movies, what's next? Free Willy, all of them, yeah, by 1993, did contribute significantly to where we are now, but I hope that you agree that this puts us in the epicenter of the universe as the saviors for these animals, not perceiving them to be wild, sentient, and to be respected. And then what's the game changer, folks? Blackfish. Yeah. And that is all in 36 years. What happened? How did we get to this point of having you here, having the concern that you do? Well, enter this guy. Dr. Michael Bigg, and then years later, it would have been here, Ken Balcom. Dr. Bigg only lived to age 51. Initially, because of the public outcry, he was tasked with getting an estimate of how many orca there actually were on our coast. And initially, that was by way of survey. Hey, on these 3 days of August, if you're on the water and you see orca, please let me know. As a result of that, 2 hotspots came out, Harrow Strait, Johnston Strait. And already he came up with an estimate that was vastly below what people perceived of only about 300 orca in that area. But of course, what was happening is that people believed that there were thousands because they were frequently seen, especially if you've got orca who are going after one of the most predictable species on the planet at certain times of the year, salmon. Same families of orca going after the same runs of salmon for hundreds of thousands of years. There was enormous skepticism when Michael Bigg said, I can tell these whales apart. No, you can't. That's ridiculous. And this blows my mind. This was 1973. And we were not studying animals as individuals other than giraffes and primates. You can't even count animals if you can't tell them apart as individuals, certainly if we're talking about marine species. But he was unstoppable. And we all know how he did it. You use saddle patch, you use dorsal fin. Remember, there was no digital photography. This was his looking at negatives underneath the microscope. But then, of course, what he could do is, okay, A1, A2, B, C, D, E. And what he did is astounding. Not only could he count them, but he unraveled this mystery. Like, wait a second, these are always together. They're never with those. Those behave differently. And he brought us to the place of knowing that the absolute most coherent way to understand orca is to perceive they're having culture. There are at least 10 different kinds in the world. Probably very well aware that off the coast of British Columbia, there are 3 different kinds, 4 different populations. They do not mate with one another. They have cultural traditions that go back hundreds of thousands of years. If you are going after salmon as the most important food for you to bulk up because they're so predictable, you have a predictable food source for only a certain part of the year. You also have a virtually deaf food source. So you can happily go around going click, 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 blah, sockeye salmon, click, 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 ooh, Chinook salmon. Yeah, they are Chinook-aholics. Their survival is reliant on this, but don't make no mistake, they also eat chum, they also eat pink, they also eat halibut, they eat some squid, they eat some rockfish. But it is the Chinook, the biggest, the fattiest, and the ones that are supposed to be around year-round. The name resident is horrible. They do not live here. If you think of how seasonal their main food is, that should make sense to you immediately. These are the inshore fish eaters, two populations that do not mate with one another. Then you have those that we still vilify, yeah? And the killers. They attacked the grey whale calf after 7 hours and they ripped out the tongue, yeah? And the grey whale mother leaves bereft, having, yeah, you know. Anyway, the mammal eaters, they're not transient. Think of what the coastal ones are feeding on. Seals are the easiest food supply, yeah? The seal haul-outs are like McDonald's for them. Then it's true. Seals are best bang for buck, don't have big teeth, they're not fast. These are the mammal eaters. They are being honored by being named, Michael Bigg is being honored because these are now being perceived to be a separate species that separated 700,000 years ago. And if you're going to honor anybody, it should be Dr. Bigg. But oh, the joy! Now they're Bigg's killer whales, which of course leads to, oh, are they bigger? And yes, thankfully they are. Yeah, they make a living ripping apart marine mammals. They are bigger. The coastal ones largely eat seals, and then Dr. Bigg never even got to know that there was the third ecotype of orca, those whose diet includes sharks. They are offshore over deep water, often very vocal, which already suggested they weren't eating marine mammals, really scratched up and teeth worn down, rough skin of sharks for teeth and the scratches. So that is where Dr. Bigg brought us and why there is this incredible legacy of knowing these whales as individuals.
So leading on from what Jackie started to kind of get into, in terms of individuals, it is truly incredible and it cannot be underestimated just how accurate, given such little information, that Michael Bigg and Ken Balcom were when they made the decision about who belonged in which family and what the relationship was between whales when these studies first started. A lot of the time I get asked questions about the naming and the nomenclature involved with these whales. So I just wanted to take you through an example of a family that we have here in the Salish Sea. So this is one of the families within J-Pod, and they're often referred to as a J4 matriline. As Jackie said, the ladies rule the roost when it comes to Orca Society. Yes. And so when we talk about families, it's all based on the female. They're the starting point of that family line. Mainly because, if you can imagine, when we see a calf swimming inside the female, it's pretty guaranteed who mum is. Father, less so. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. So when they set about mapping the family lines of these whales, they start with the female. So this all started way, way back with J4, a whale called Mama. And then Mama had two successful offspring that kind of made it to adulthood and were females. And these were J19 and another whale, J11, called Blossom. Now Blossom would have been here. So to this day, we only have J19 left. And J19 had one daughter, Eclipse. She has since had a calf, J51, Nova. And he is one of the few remaining surviving whales from the baby boom of calves that we had a few years ago. But J11, this family line here we refer to now as the J19s and the J11s. Now, although J11 is no longer with us, her offspring are all still surviving. And Blossom died in 2008 at the age of only 36. And she was quite an interesting family to follow, because when Blossom died, Mako, her son, 39, was only 3 years old. And the survival of young calves when they lose their mum declines significantly. However, with this situation, Mako was largely raised by his brother and sister, J27 and J31. And to this day, this family is still quite a tight-knit family. The new calf that we have just had in J-pod is actually from this whale. This is J31. Now the low blossom is gone. This mature line is still referred to as the J11s. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, and the reason I'm telling you all this is because while we know more about these whales, arguably, than probably any other population of whales on the planet, they're still throwing us curveballs. And it's wonderful when that happens. There was a study by a group of NOAA researchers, and they found out rather worryingly that the majority of the southern residents that are currently in the population are fathered by just 2 males, over 50%. One of them was this big guy here. This is Ruffles, J1, and the other one is L41 or Mega. Now Mega is the only male of these two that's still surviving, and he is now the oldest male in the southern residents by quite a bit. So we know that only the oldest males are making it through to be really successful at reproducing. Now, when this study came out, there was big concerns because in terms of in J-pod's case, a lot of the J-pod whales that we now see were actually fathered by this guy. And there was huge concerns about the inbreeding that was within J-pod. Not only he had mated with his daughters, but his nieces and aunts, according to what we believed. And it wasn't actually until the very beginning of this year when somebody was looking at the supplementary material for this study, because you can imagine when genetic studies are produced, they are vast, that they uncovered that this whale here, J1, was related to a male, L57, and he was a half-brother of this male, an L-pod. And then when they traced it back, the mother of that whale, L45, was the mother of this whale. Now let that settle in. This means that this whale was not a J-pod whale. He was an L-pod whale. And now this whale was named J1 because he swam around with Granny, J2, the very infamous Granny. And it was assumed that this was Granny's adult son. Now, what we now know is that actually this was not Granny's son, and it was actually a female, an L-pod, who was still alive at the time when this guy was swimming with Granny. Many of you have heard me tell a story about Onyx, L87, and as scientists we like to say, well, this is the exception to the rule. This whale has changed pods. But it turns out this guy changed pods, and it wasn't because he lost his mother. His mother and brother were still alive. But it underpins everything that we thought about the southern residents was fact in terms of the age of Granny, the inbreeding within J-pod. It's not quite as bad now as we had thought. But again, this was an opportunistic kind of, it was a grad student, Michael Weiss, who works with Deborah Giles and then Centre for Whale Research that came across this. And it's still sinking in terms of what the ramification that might look like. So again, we know so much about these whales, so much, and yet still what we actually think we know for sure, they're still kind of, as I said, throwing us a curveball. So it's very, very cool. The other things in terms of science is under our understanding, Jackie again talked about this at the beginning in terms of the importance of whales, not just as what we love, but the importance within the ecosystems and all the other animals that are connected to them. They're sometimes referred to as ecosystem engineers. If you think about the depths of the ocean, nutrients sinks down, and whales are amazing in terms of nutrient cycling. They come to the surface and they poop. And that brings out nutrients to the top of the water column where it can see light. And everything is so deeply connected in the oceans. And whales are no different. So again, it's talking about this fact that when we want to save the whales, it's because they play not just this beautiful part for us to look at, but they play a crucial part in our ecosystems and how they function. But the other things about whales is, for us, we're such visual creatures and we see whales. Again, Jackie talked about this, we don't see everything under the surface always. And because of that, we've got to think of them like these canaries in the coal mine. When we're seeing something going wrong with the whales, it's because there's other things that are going wrong that we're not seeing underneath. This whole system is breaking. And that's why we're encouraging to think more about, not just for the whales, but what it means for the wider system out there. Our marine life is in trouble. Bringing it back to our southern residents here. there's lots and lots of complex reasons that these whales are struggling at the moment. But they're so very interconnected, and they all stem from three really big factors. Again, I know some of you have been here and we've talked about this before, but just to recap, because it's super important to understand how all our actions fit into these different component parts of what's causing the problem out there. So the big thing a lot of the time is talked about is the lack of fish and the foraging. Jackie mentioned how they're so specialised in terms of really loving their Chinook. I always kind of say that it's like, it must be like their chocolate. It's like, wouldn't we all just love to love chocolate all the time? So the prey, the Chinook, aren't doing so well, and we see that affecting the whales. It's so interconnected then in terms of the contaminants. We know that a lot of the contaminants that we put into our system, unfortunately due to their chemical properties, they bind really readily with lipids, and so that's fat molecules. So when we have these whales that are more robust in terms of having a lot more body condition, these contaminants are not necessarily introduced into their systems quite so readily. But when they start to metabolize their blubber and their fats, then they get this essential big downloaded dump of toxins into their systems. So again, trying to appreciate there's this connectivity between healthy, plump whales and contaminants. They're not just in isolation here. And then of course noise pollution. And it's not just noise pollution, it's vessel disturbance and disturbance in general as well. Anything that is stopping these whales successfully foraging, especially when years when their prey is less available, that can have a big impact on their system. So the three are not to be thought of in isolation. They're really interconnected. And it's all three of these problems that we need to address as humans, for sure. Jackie.
And then indeed ensuring that we bring in other species as well. As a humpback researcher and emphasizing the need for humility because of how little we know, humpbacks are really easy to tell apart as individuals. They have been studied as individuals, not by our organization specifically, but globally. For 40 years, we don't know the basics about the giants that breathe the very air that we do. Nobody knows how any baleen whale finds their food. They do not have biosonar in the way of the toothed whales. The evidence is right there, 2 blowholes exposed. The echolocation organ is over the second blowhole in toothed whales. Nobody knows how they find Hawaii. If they were 5 degrees off, they would blast by. We're doing work on looking at krill versus herring. How much do they need? Nobody even knows how often they're getting hit. And we will never find that because dead whales most often sink. So you can see scarring as a legacy of survival, and our research into entanglement shows that 50% of the humpbacks on our coast have scarring, indicating that they have been entangled. But again, they are the survivors. They do not give an indication of how many have settled to the ocean bottom dead. But how little do we humans know? You're probably well aware that humpback males sing. They sing in our waters as well. And of course, right from the start, we humans, would think this day males are singing, females vocalize too. It must be that the males are singing to the females. I sing better than he does. Let me be your mama, your baby daddy, rather. And probably with that gangster accent is probably how humpbacks speak. But please realize, no, there is no evidence to support this at all. After 40 years of research, we do not know why humpback males sing. The best theory so far is that they are developing acoustic territory. How little do we know on the species that has been studied as long as it has? The whole notion that they are either Hawaiian, Mexican, or Central American is also being thrown on its head, and that there's much more mixing going on. But indeed, all the males within one breeding area do sing the same song, not at the same time. But if the song changes, they all adopt the change. And if that isn't a source for humility, I don't know what is. But imagine me in humpback immersion, watching a whale I know really, really well. That's Conger. And one day he is sitting there like this. I am looking right up into his palate. What this has led to, and we've published on this work, is that the humpbacks around northeastern Vancouver Island have found, under certain conditions, a way to better exploit juvenile herring. It's called trap feeding. They set a giant trap with their jaws. The birds are still chasing the fish. You don't have to use the energy of lunging through it. Of course, the whales are still learning as well. What have we learned from the whales? You know this, otherwise you wouldn't be here. We have an incredible capacity for change, but we have not changed enough. You knew about this very likely already, that the train wreck of the southern residents has been going on for more than 20 years. But it took the world to really wake up to have a mother orca carry her dead newborn on her nose for 17 days. Then suddenly there's also additional resources available to find out what's going on. Lauren's already touched on, that this really is complex. We humans want a simple answer. This is horrible. The whales are in trouble. They're incredibly skinny. We can document their demise. Whose fault is it? It's the fishermen. No, it's not. It's the noise. No, it's not. It's the whale watchers. No, it's not. It's all of it. It really is. The research supports. No more research is required to know that it is these three things working synergistically that is not just the demise of the southern residents, dear folks, but please let's not forget that the other three populations in British Columbia are all threatened. They're one step under endangered. And the A-clan whales of the northern residents are also skinny. They also depend on Fraser-bound Chinook. But please, for the whales, do not feed into this deflection of it's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault. That is our human inclination to do that, because to reflect it back on ourselves is virtually intolerable. It's not just about the orca. So often the whales are indicators of what is happening. They're the first to testify to environmental problems. There are at least 160 dead gray whales that washed up this year from Mexico up to Alaska. The best theory for what has happened, the best hypothesis, is that there wasn't enough food for them in the Bering Sea, and then migrating away, as they will do, to get away from as great a risk of mammal-eating killer whales when they have their calves, they come back up and they ran out of steam. Indicators of a changing climate, potentially. Of course, also indicators of there not being an away. If something is not biodegradable, it is going to come back. Very tangibly in the stomach of gray whales, who then feed on the ocean bottom. But of course, this is also in our very food webs, because the plastics are going to break down into smaller and smaller pieces. Let's not forget all the positive changes in people realizing what this legacy of plastic use and disposables is. Humpback and fin whales have served as indicators. And again, this is the best hypothesis. It was very difficult to prove what happened. Back in 2014 to 2016, there was a larger than normal number of humpbacks and fin whales that were found dead on shore. Again, most of them would have died in deeper waters and never been indicated within this count. But that's when we had warm water, very persistent, very large mass. And the best hypothesis is that if you have a lot of warm water, you get more algae. Included within those algae are some that produce a naturally occurring toxin that does not go away in the same way as PCBs, dioxins, and so forth do not go away. And that with every level in the food web, you are going to get the accumulation of these toxins. And with these baleen whales being high up, that they would have died from the poisoning. And these chemicals do impact immunity and ability to reproduce. What we've learned, of course, we have to be practical. We need to have an overlap with whales. We need to be on the water. But I've referenced our research already in looking at the scarring, evidence of then how much entanglement it is for these big guys that have come back to our coast. And this is pretty shocking. And the gap needs to be closed in terms of resources and awareness that people know what to do and what not to do when it comes to entanglement. And then with the humpbacks coming back, sorry folks, Yeah, the measures that work for orca to reduce disturbance to them generally do not work for humpbacks. The average boater does not realize that these giants are back in our waters, that we have a second chance with them since we stopped killing them in 1966, and we've become programmed to think that whales on our coast are all like orca. They're on the surface a lot and going in one direction. With humpbacks, we think they're going somewhere. No, they're not. These are fishermen and fisherwomen who have preferences for certain places on our coast. They might have a second or third favorite, but they're generally going around in big sweeping circles, can be astoundingly oblivious of boats. It certainly doesn't work for them, but it certainly doesn't work for humans either. There's now somebody who is paralyzed on our coast as a result of having had a collision with a humpback. So our campaign to try to counteract this, see a blow, go slow. And in one of the ways that you could help for the whales is indeed to be eyes on the water, but also aid in the education of best practices to reduce collision. So to round this up, where do we go from here? What's this whole hashtag for the whales thing all about? So this is all pretty heavy. Whales dying, starving whales, whales with plastic, whales with toxins, whales suffering from noise impacts and vessel strike. Is there hope? But of course there is. Truly, let's see it as the whales being barometers of our value systems. We have an incredible capacity for change. But again, for me through and through, and where I believe the greater merit is, because if you only talk about the orca and saving them, you are putting people into crisis about saving bees versus saving orca versus saving trees versus child poverty. How very different it would be if we realized that there are common solutions and that we are ultimately talking about not competing interests, but the whales as barometers of what we are doing to ourselves. The common solutions, folks, I would say that for almost any, this is what keeps me out of the pit of despair. Believe this with everything that I have, that there are common solutions to social environmental problems. And that the big impediments are that we think we have to be perfect, that you're either a fossil fuel user or not. If we just see energy use as being the problem that it is, anything we can do to reduce it will help. So many problems are related to our use of disposables, which is of course directly tied into energy use. Having our value system manipulated to believe that our value is associated with what we own is a gigantic problem. Of course, there's a level of well-being that we want to attain, but after that, isn't it time that we want? More than extra affluence and not buying into big houses, big acquisitions. We are cursed by a system where we consider things in units of 4 years only. Election cycles. That is not how nature works. That is not what our great-grandchildren are going to thank us for. We have a disconnect, not understanding what we do on the other side of the planet is impacting species here, like the toxins in the killer whales, like the pesticides in Canada's polar bears that have never even been used in Canada, but how our purchasing actions and everything else also impact the other side of the planet. And then there's the incredible and fortunate mentality of perceiving there to be a barrier between land and sea. And then, of course, there's the state of overwhelm. Now what? The killer whales, they're dying. I care about killer whales. Again, this is this idea that if they are presented as separate problems, people will go into an ecophobic, ecoparalytic, denial, or blame state. And that won't work. So for the whales, what we're asking is that this hashtag, and even the concept of a hashtag might be new to you, but using the power of social media, not in a righteous way, but in a guiding way, have people think about the things that you very likely, very naturally do because it's better for society, which is the same as the environment. So not buying as much. All the conscious choices you make, tag that with For the Whales. Anyone who's putting a Chinook back in the ocean, hashtag it for the whales. At any rate, the lessons learned ultimately, and what I believe in with all that I have, is what a world it would be if we realized how much humility we need to have. We have not figured out the basics about the giants. What a different world it would be if we realized our connection to the ocean and to other humans on the other side of the planet. Not choosing to buy something that is less expensive because you know the social costs on the other side of the planet. What a different world it would be if we would celebrate human ingenuity, but not as an escape route. Rather, this is a really great idea. Let's find out if it's dangerous first, before we proceed. And how about we respect the incredible knowledge of technology in our youth, rather than disrespecting it? Because if they have the love of nature, coupled with technology, it will be a different world. What a different world it would be if we didn't associate loss with using less. So often when I give presentations, as soon as I talk about reducing, I can feel the energy in the room change. Because even environmentalists and organizations have put out in the world that using less is somehow about martyrdom or loss. This is not the case. There are huge gains by moving forward for what is better for society. You are liberated in many ways from economy, and certainly to our youth, we should be showing the way forward in how there are opportunities, because despite the powers that want us to have our beliefs and our values associated with acquisition, look at all the positive changes. And then what a different world it would be that rather than despair and paralysis, that we realize our capacity for change and how ultimately we are incredibly empowered through our consumer behavior and through our voting behavior.
Who has been basically corralling this whole project from afar. She's coming up from San Francisco today. Sarah, you're going to come up, and Sarah's going to start introducing us and taking us through our ambassadors. And hopefully the videos will work. I can do that.
Awesome, thank you guys for coming. So during this part of the event, we're going to introduce our ambassadors. Simras has been working with these local organizations for the last several months. And they were chosen because of the actions they're already taking to reduce their impact on the marine environment, especially the impact on whales. And we are lucky to have some of our ambassadors here tonight. So our first ambassador is Dina from Lush Cosmetics. She actually isn't here tonight, but we are going to watch her clip right now.
We create soaps, body washes, scrubs, shampoo, hair care. We have an entire skincare range. We manufacture and distribute our fresh handmade cosmetics across Canada and the US to our 160 stores. So if you've ever visited one of our shops, you might recall our signature Lush scent, and that's due to about 40% of our products being naked is what we call them, so that means without packaging. Lush offers a grants program. We sell a lotion called Charity Pot, and 100% of the sale price of this lotion goes directly towards projects by groups that are advocating for animal welfare, environmental justice, and human rights issues. Through our charitable giving, we have supported a number of organizations like Simras, different groups that are supporting marine conservation, research, policy protection, and also zero waste initiatives to help remove waste product that would enter our waterways. We have to do what we can with the limited time that we have left in order to make the most responsible decisions to ensure that we can protect what we have. So being able to purchase products that have very limited or the absence of packaging is a really great way to be able to enjoy the things that we need to keep ourselves clean and to, help us relax after a hard day without that excess of packaging. Every day, Lush is improving our business practices for the whales.
Our next ambassador is the Port of Vancouver. Orla really wanted to make it tonight, but unfortunately she couldn't come last minute. But next is the Port of Vancouver.
The Vancouver Fraser Port Authority ECHO program is an initiative aimed at better understanding and reducing the impact of shipping on endangered whales in our region. So we conduct a number of research projects, and a lot of them are focused on underwater noise. The orcas use sound to navigate, to communicate, and to echolocate to find their food. So the shipping noise can kind of become loud enough that it masks their ability to echolocate and find that prey, and that's really what we're looking to reduce. On an average traffic day, we might get around 14 or 15 deep sea vessels, and a high traffic day would be 20 or 21 ships. Every large vessel that comes into our waters here gets a BC Coast pilot on their way in, and so we work really closely with the pilots and the captains aboard those international ships to slow those ships down when they're coming through our waters. They've been amazing. In our first year of the slowdown, we had 60% participation in a voluntary effort, and in 2018 we had 87% participation. One of the main keys to success of the ECHO program has been our collaboration with a number of stakeholders throughout the region. We worked with CIMRES to collect and analyze the data that is coming from their hydrophone. The more the public understands what the issues are, the more they can do their small part. At the end of the day, all this research, all this science, all this work that we're doing together, it's for the whales.
Who is here tonight, Brian Henry from Ocean River Sport. If you want to come up and say.
I don't really know why I'm here, except I was asked, and I'm really honored. I own an outdoor store and an ecotourism company, and you might have seen our kayak shack down on the dock. And where's Cedric? There you go. And where's my wife? So we're part of Saturna, and when I was approached, I'm kind of going, well, why? What makes us a little bit different? And it's because what we do, we create advocates. Every time we take someone out on the ocean and we introduce them to the intertidal zone, or we see whales, or we see seals, or sea lions, or kelp crabs, or whatever it is, it might be something tiny. And when I take families out, and I see those kids light up, and they're in the intertidal zone, and we're having so much fun. Or there's a kelp crab that we've got on their deck, and they're screaming. It is just, I know that when they've left, they'll think differently of the environment and be protecting. That's the biggest single thing we can do. We were one of the very first companies in Victoria to go plastic bag or disposable bag free. We had no bags, and it was a big fight even between my staff trying to make it happen. So we try to think that way. We're not perfect, but we're working on it constantly. And I hope by introducing people, and maybe we'll be able to work with Seek a little more and even get your kids out there this September. We're advocates, and we think what CIMRES does is extremely important. Thank you. We're all about getting people into the outdoors. So we're a paddle sports company first and an outdoor store second. We have 3 different locations, one in downtown Victoria, we have one in Oak Bay Marina, and another one that we're really proud of out on Saturna Island, which is right next to the newest national park in Canada. I think our tours are pretty multi-leveled, and they introduce people to nature and they introduce people to the joys of paddling. The biggest thing we do is make people aware so we can make more advocates of nature. It's important to us to sustain what we have. We're now starting to bring more people to Saturna to go on adventures with us. And we really want to work more with Simrez so we can have them go and listen to a lecture. And to take them to a Simrez talk is a bonus, huge bonus. They're so valuable and so interesting for us to attend. I feel Simrez is a tremendous example of a community getting together, connecting with experts from outside our community, but with support of UVic and UBC and the Vancouver Aquarium and other companies too. Saturna has something in Simrez that I don't think exists anywhere else. I think there's more of a movement than ever before in BC. It has got an upwelling right now and people are so supportive. Let's ride that wave for the whales.
And next up, I would like to invite Jess from Salt Shop.
Hey everyone. Just to say a few words about what I do is first, I'm honored to be here, honored to be chosen. It was really flattering. I think my story starts as a young kid, just playing on the coast, constantly on the beach, looking for things, and to play on what Jackie says about our capacity for change. I grew up, I went through high school, decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur and do my own thing, and started making t-shirts and selling them at the Saturday market on Salt Spring. That's where I'm from and where I'm based. And at first it was just for fun, and it was just because my friends wanted to wear them, and it was fun. And over time, as time went on, I changed companies a few times, and in my early or mid-20s, I asked myself, what do I really want to care about? I don't just want to make shirts that people like to wear. There needs to be something more to that. And I decided to name my company Salt after the ocean and the island that I grew up on, and how much I love the ocean. And I knew that so many people don't get that experience. I'm super fortunate to live in an area where I get to interact with sea creatures and the ocean. I get to share it with my kids and my partner and my family, and not everyone else gets that. And if we think about the world and those that have never seen the ocean, how are they supposed to care about it? And that's how I took that idea and put it on to clothing. It has, in some capacities, nothing to do with the ocean, and in other capacities, everything to do with the ocean. So I produce Canadian-made, local fashion that's sewn in Vancouver. All of my fibers dissolve in salt water, and they're 97% plastic-free, if not 100%. So I'm super grateful that you guys have recognized me for what I do. It makes me emotional. Yeah, and I just think that if we all take something that matters to us or something we're passionate about and apply a world issue to it, we have the capacity to evoke change. We have the capacity to touch people and educate people in realms that they would not be looking for it. Young females come into my store just trying to find an outfit to go dancing in. And I share with them why fashion matters, why fast fashion should not be supported, and how they can feel empowered to create change in this world for the ocean and for the whales based off of what they choose to put on their body. And I think it's really special, and that's what I do. Salt is a clothing brand that's created from a passion of mine, which revolves around the ocean. And we design ethical clothing that's meant to be worn every day and keep you comfortable, but without harming the ocean environment. When I started this new company, I asked myself, what do I want it to be about? What do I want it to revolve around? And the thing that made me happiest was the ocean. I love being in it, on it, around it, swimming and playing in it. And I wanted to make sure that other people could feel that as well. We use all eco-friendly and sustainable fibers, and we've done our research and make sure that they'll dissolve in the oceans. There's not any microplastics. We're producing close to home. Everything's sewn in Vancouver, and then, you know, the back and forth, I do a lot of that myself between the shops. So we're minimizing the amount of shipping that we're doing. Well, obviously Simrez is about saving the ocean. I appreciate their passion and motivation and drive to share with people all that is around the whales and, you know, saving them and how our basic everyday habits affect that. And I think that having an organization that promotes that and then even learning from it at times and being able to jump on that bandwagon and really bring that conversation into what we're doing, specifically with respect to the whales as well. I'm learning a lot from them about the whales and able to share that with our community, which is really empowering. At SALT, we are creating community alongside ethical and sustainable clothing for the whales.
Next up, I would like to invite David from JASCO.
Hey everybody, first of all I'd like to say I'm very appreciative to be invited here and honored to be an ambassador of this event, and really I really enjoyed, I'd like to say, Jackie and Lauren, your talks were fantastic, very informative and energetic, and it really got everybody engaged, and thank you for that. I come from, my background is in science. I'm a physicist actually, and you wouldn't think a physicist would be working with whales, but I started off not knowing I would be working in the ocean. I did get into acoustics when I was in graduate school at University of Victoria, and I ended up in a company that works with underwater noise, starting off working with sonars. But little did I know that eventually the environmental aspects of underwater noise would become really important. And you've seen, so in some of the talks tonight, we've heard about how noise can interact with many other stressors to these animals. And for example, we think about prey and the effect of noise on prey availability. These are really tightly linked stressors. You see a combination of reduced prey availability and then noise that makes it more difficult to find that prey just exacerbates that problem. So noise is really a big issue for marine mammals. And as Jackie was pointing out, she takes a lot of her photos looking up into the light. And underwater, the light travels very poorly underwater. And when you get away from the surface or at nighttime, you don't have that visual acuity that you have, that people have. So marine mammals have evolved to use sound much like we use vision. So we have to be thinking about how do animals they use sound very different than us. For example, an offspring of a marine mammal has to keep in contact with its parent. At nighttime in a stormy weather, there are no landmarks underwater. So in the ocean, animals have to use sound. It's their only way to communicate and keep track of each other. We know when we're in a grocery store, we lose our child around an aisle. You know, it's very stressful for us. Well, a marine mammal in the dark in the storm, the only way they can get back to their offspring is by using communication. So you can imagine a big ship or a large amount of shipping noise can actually break that communication. And this is the type of, it's hard for us to actually empathize with it, but it's because they're in a different environment. So noise is a really key issue to be concerned about for all marine mammals, not just southern residents, but all of the seals, sea lions, cetaceans, fish even. So that's our background. And my company, JASCO, is a group of scientists who work exclusively in the field of underwater noise. We work with Simrez on analyzing some of their acoustic data And I'm happy to say that I'm going to be more connected to Saturna in the next year as we are installing a listening station off of East Point, and that will be out here quite regularly servicing the offshore hydrophones for that. JASCO is a applied science company. We work mainly in the marine environment, and we specialize in the unusual field of underwater sound. One of the stressors to southern resident killer whales is noise produced by man-made activities, and that can include shipping. It can include also construction activities like pile driving associated with. Some of the work that we are doing is to help understand what that noise is and what its impacts can be on the southern residents. One of the things we do is we use our computer models to predict the noise levels from ships in areas of importance to killer whales. And we can also look at scenarios like moving ships and to see how much that saves in terms of noise exposures to these animals. The people who live on Saturna Island are dead center in the areas of most importance to the southern resident killer whales. And they have the ability to visually at least monitor these animals in their backyard. We are working close by with the scientists at the Saturna Island East Point Lighthouse on their noise studies, and we are helping them analyze some of their data. We are working and collaborating with CIMRES to provide information that helps them collecting acoustic data and collecting visual observations. It's important to be able to tie those different observation types together. We all have to work together to make this a better environment for these animals. And that requires the involvement of the government, scientists, and organizations like CIMRES. We are all collecting information to feed decisions that make the environment a nicer place and a quieter place for the whales.
Next up, we have Bruno from the Green Boater, and he might show up any second. He's like en route on his boat, so hopefully he shows up, but we'll play his video right now.
Boaters, I believe, are the first line of defense for the ocean. There are 19 million recreational boaters in North America, and if every one of them changed something about the way in which they behave on the water, it could reduce what they do in the ocean. The Green Boater is all about educating boaters and ocean enthusiasts about products and practices that reduce all forms of ocean pollution. Oddly enough, being a boater my whole life, I never thought about the impact I could have as a boater. And as I was learning about the different things I could do to help reduce the impact on the ocean, I thought if I just documented my journey, I could educate others. I have now people from all over the world, whether they are biologists or scientists, as well as manufacturers, who want to get in on the conversation and be able to share their information without thinking this is an advertorial, but just say, what can we do differently? And here's some of the things that could move the needle a little bit towards becoming a green boater, somebody who cares a little bit more about the ocean. I started on this journey as a green boater to find products, but I learned that it's a lot about your practices too. So sound pollution is a big deal in these local waters here. And what I really appreciate about CIMRES is that they've taken a local topic, they've gained worldwide attention on what we're doing here. And I'm just so thankful that CIMRES has actually taken this initiative. It's a big challenge, and so all of us can do a little bit of our part to change our behavior, change the way in which we practice, change the way in which the products we use, to do your part for the whales.
Next up, we have Paula and Nairn from the Zero Waste Emporium, and they couldn't be here tonight. They're celebrating the first year anniversary of their business, but we will show their video right now.
Zero Waste Emporium is
Zero Waste Emporium is Vancouver Island's first zero waste grocery store. The whole concept is to encourage people to bring their own containers, and that way they can get all of their grocery shopping done completely package free, and that way there's no extra waste and they're reusing what they already have at home.
So we're challenging the movement of buying food by providing unpackaged and bulk products, everything from milk to unpackaged tofu, to meat proteins, to snack things like crackers and popcorn.
Moving into a zero waste lifestyle and eventually a zero waste economy will help us reduce the amount of plastic that we're kind of throwing out into the ocean and into our environment that is going to stay there for hundreds and hundreds of years, right?
The response has been overwhelming, and we keep getting more customers in all the time, and we keep bringing new products in all the time, especially local producers that we're finding that are willing to work with us in a package-free way. So it's been encouraging, enlightening, and really humbling to have so much support from the community for this.
Living on an island, everything that we do has a direct impact on the environment around us, especially our oceans. And our whales are very precious to us, right? And so by reducing the amount of garbage that is ending up either in our landfill or in our ocean, we're helping people be a little more conscious as to how those impacts or how those little changes can impact our whales.
You're saving food waste, you're saving money, and you're saving the planet at the same time. So we're eliminating single-use plastic from our life for the whales.
We're living a zero waste lifestyle for the whales.
So that was our final ambassador, the 7 ambassadors for our For the Whales program. And if you guys, as Lauren and Jackie were saying, go out, take photos, videos of what you're doing for the whales.
At any rate, folks, just to summarize, you've been staring at this in the background. I think we've got an incredibly sound idea about the things that we can do to make an impact. This summary, of course, is not proportional. Consumer behavior is not 1/5 of the impact of what you can do, but truly anything that reduces disposables, bad chemicals, that fossil fuel use, again without the idea of being perfect, these will all have impacts. Putting out into the world the liberation that comes with that, with using less. Anything whereby you are reporting. Be aware of marine mammal regulations and what they are. I suspect you are. They are bundled on our website under Sea of Blow, Go Slow. Please, when you see violations, report them because it proves that there is the need for enforcement and education. And of course, if you're on the water yourself, it is your responsibility to know what to do in the presence of marine wildlife. Marine hotspots as well, what to do, what not to do. Certainly very raw experience myself with humpbacks that people aren't aware that they can suddenly pop up. So many things we can do that I'm very intrigued. I didn't know about the Green Boater, the program that's being done there. I'm involved as well with the Canadian Power Squadron, and there will be a whole Boat Blue program respecting boaters for their presence on the water and therefore the eyes and also the ethics that they should have when it comes to the marine environment. And then of course anything we can do to slow down. We're working on a video where people will then be able to hear. We're in a quieter area on northern Vancouver Island, but it is my experience that it blows people's minds that you've got a hydrophone in the water, you can hear a boat clear as day, and you can't even see the boat. So that we remember what we know as children with our heads in the bathtub, that sound is magnified underwater. At any rate, these are the actions. Please help us seed this and put it into the world. And thank you so much that you guys gave this legs.